Did you know that you can get this same great episode of the Rural Woman podcast ad-free? I get it. Listening to ads during a podcast isn't always my favorite either. But in order to keep the lights and coffee pot on here at the Rural Woman Podcast Studios, they are necessary. I am so grateful to each and every one of my sponsors, but if you yourself would like to skip the ads while supporting the show, consider joining me over on Patreon. Patrons of the Rural Woman podcast get ad-free episodes starting at Tier 5 on their podcast player of choice each week, plus some other great benefits. Find out more by heading to the link in today's show notes to learn how you can become a patron through Patreon. Hi, I'm Caitlin Dubin, and this is the Rural Woman podcast. I'm a first-generation farmer who married into agriculture. Born and raised in a city, I was so unfamiliar with where my food came from, but I was determined to figure it out. Through my journey into agriculture, I saw women who were strong but humble, often taking a back seat. To me, these women were leaders who deserved a seat at the table. I created the Rural Woman podcast to share the voices of women in an industry whose stories often went untold. The rural entrepreneurs who live and breathe their work, full of grit and pride. We come here to share our stories, to be in community with each other, to be challenged and inspired, but most importantly, to be celebrated and to be heard. We may not all live, farm, ranch, or homestead the same, but we are all connected. We are rural women, and our stories are worthy of being told. Hey everyone, welcome back to a brand new episode of the Rural Woman podcast. Today, you'll meet Dana DiPrima. On the heels of a long career in social media marketing and community organizing, and in the shadow of an accidental farm in upstate New York, Dana founded the For Farmers movement to support small American farmers by sharing farmer stories, dispelling myths, and awarding grants. We talk about why knowing where our food comes from matters, how farmers often feel overlooked, and why farmers are the real MVPs of sustainability. From busting farm myths to the power of grants and building stronger communities, this episode is all about connection. I am so excited for Dana to be my first of the new recording season for the Rural Woman podcast. In case you didn't know, I try my best to record all of my episodes, all 52 of them, during the off-farm season for me. So once I'm off the combine, I am in my office recording all of the amazing stories of women in agriculture and rural living through the Rural Woman podcast. So we are in recording season as we speak right now. So if you have a story you want to share, or if you know a rural woman who has an inspiring story that you think should be told, head on over to our website, wildrosefarmer.com, and learn more about how you can nominate yourself or an amazing rural woman you know to be on the show. Without further ado, my friends, let's get to this week's episode with Dana. Dana, welcome to the Rural Woman podcast. How are you today?
I'm great. It's really great to be here with you. I'm excited to talk with you.
It's so great to chat with you. And like we were chatting before I hit the fancy record button, this is my first recording of my new recording season after getting off of the combine. So I am extra excited to be sitting in this chair instead of the combine chair.
Well, I love to be first. I mean, my last name is DiPrima, which I think means the first. So
that's it. That's very yes. I won't fact check you on that.
I'm just going to, go with it. I love that. I love that.
Dana, your journey with farming began quite unexpectedly. Can you share with us how you accidentally became a farmer and how that all started for you?
Sure. Well, I grew up in North Carolina. I was very animal centric as a kid. And I think there are a lot of like happy accidents in my life. I moved accidentally to New York City and spent many, many years working in New York City and raising two children. And then in 2008, bought a place in upstate New York that was very rural. It used to be a farm. Our pond actually has one of those land bridges it's now underwater, but had a land bridge. So in case half of your pond broke, your cows would have the other side to drink from. And we still have all kinds of agricultural relics throughout a 65-acre property. And the accident really happened as my daughter asked if we could get chickens. And having been a little, several years away from a more rural existence, I was like, yeah, totally, let's get chickens. So we did. And those chickens led to goats, and those goats led to donkeys, and somewhere in there, bees and many, many gardens. So my little farm is still going. It is an accidental farm. I farm mainly stories there because it's one crazy story after another. But it also led me to my biggest farming activity, which is working with farmers all across the United States to, talk about their lives and also to really get into the middle of their lives and their work in a way. And we can talk about that. But yeah, the farm was an accident. And I think when you have chickens, you're kind of like, yeah, sure, whatever, we'll get goats. There we go.
See, I did the opposite. I got goats first before chickens because I think I've mentioned this a million times now. Birds are a little bit creepy to me. So like I thought goats would be more like a dog. And they kind of are, but they're very naughty dogs. So
I have heard that too. Like if you can have a dog, if you can handle a dog, you can handle goats. But I don't think dogs get out like goats do. I have a funny little story about my goats. I was cleaning out the barn and I left the gate open. I think, moving feed into the feed room, and the goats get out. And I'm like, fine, if I shake some feed, they'll come right back. And I hear this really loud noise, and I'm like, what's going on? What are they doing? And it happened again. I was like, wait a minute, what's going on? And I turn around, I go onto the other side of my pickup truck, and my driver's side door is bashed in because my goats, being that my truck was a little bit shiny, saw a goat in the reflection and banged their head, and they have big horns, and they banged dents into the side of my truck.
Oh my God.
Yeah, try explaining that. So accidental farm, lots of crazy stories.
Absolutely.
And my goats live to see another day.
Those are, I bet their name is Lucky, or it should be. So coming into agriculture in an accidental way, looking back now, how has that shaped your perspective of agriculture, of how you grew up and moving to New York to where you are now?
Yeah, it seems like a crazy journey. I think I'm a curious person, and, the contrast, if you imagine like spending days in, weekdays in New York City and then switching to a more rural life. My neighbors are farmers. I've just sort of become friends with a lot of farmers in my area. That's where I got my chickens from. Farmers love to see what I'll get up to. So they were pretty excited when I got the goats and the donkeys. And, they think I'm a little, what are you doing? Like, you're pretty brave. Like, okay, what else do you want? And I think I just, like, the way my mind works is I was just sort of thinking about, like, my life and how I see it and how important it is for all of us to be more connected to nature, more connected to our food and where it comes from, and not to take for granted that food that you get in the grocery store, just appears magically. And I think, as years went forward. I mean, I started writing about it, but as years, go forward, you're just like, so many people are like, oh yeah, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about that. You have to kill the chicken in order to eat it. I'm like, well, you might want to take your head out of the sand a little bit, get a little bit closer to where your food comes from. And I think when we do ignore where our food comes from and how it gets to us, we end up with some pretty big problems. So in 2016, I started writing a blog about what I saw, the contrast between urban and rural life, the contrast between what we, take for granted maybe in a city life that is a little bit more obvious in rural living and being connected with farmers. In 2019, I started a podcast where I was exclusively interviewing farmers from across the country. And that was really eye-opening. I mean, all over the country, right? So I started out doing it in person. And then when the pandemic hit, I started a lot more online interviews, which expanded horizons for me. And I interviewed, farmers in really remote pockets, famous farmers, farmers who have no time, had a minute to talk. And what I realized was what I was seeing in the early days of my blog, and sort of my little aha became bigger and deeper, that our farmers are largely invisible, unfortunately.
Right.
And I think when you live in the middle of agriculture, maybe you don't think of it that way, but when I talk to people, all across the country, farmers feel invisible. They don't feel like they're, really counted. People don't understand what sunrise to sunset and sunset to sunrise looks like, what a farmer's job looks like, what healthcare looks like, what insurance issues, small farmers are facing, the land issues that people who want to farm are facing, the issues that BIPOC farmers are facing. I mean, just like so many issues. This is, the one thing that we have in common is that we eat food. We have a lot of differences, but food is a real common denominator for all of us. And if we're not taking care of where our food comes from and taking it for granted, and our farmers are invisible and disappearing by the hundreds of thousands along with millions of acres of farmland, we're going to be in dire straits.
Absolutely. Well, and what a pivotal time and a pivotal moment for you, starting sharing your journey back in 2016 to starting a podcast in 2019. Very similar to me. What a time to start a podcast before the year after, when the boom came, followed by the regression of podcasts afterwards. Congratulations for continuing to do it since then, because, everybody had their COVID projects. But it's just what you said about the invisibility factor and, the general population and the general public not knowing who a farmer is, or what a farmer looks like, or what it looks like to be a farmer and what it takes to be a farmer. I came from that background. I grew up in what some would call a rural area, or connected to rural farmers very close to us, but I didn't know anything about agriculture. And then when we go on the flip side, when you are in agriculture, to feel that invisibility, but to have people who advocate for you, to build that community for you that you can be a part of, I think that is something that's super important. And that is something that you have continued to do. Hey, small business owners, are you feeling overwhelmed by the countless ways to advertise your brand online? Me too. A powerful tool that you might be overlooking: Pinterest. Did you know that Pinterest is the third largest search engine, right behind Google and YouTube? With 500 million people using Pinterest every month, it's a goldmine for small business owners like us. Whether you're looking to drive more traffic to your website, grow your email list, or increase product sales, Pinterest can help you achieve your goals. Shireen from Pinning by Bad Gringa is an experienced Pinterest strategist and an avid woman in agriculture who is passionate about helping small business owners like us unlock the full potential of Pinterest. Pinterest is a visual discovery engine. It's perfect for showcasing your products and driving targeted traffic to your website, and Shireen is here to guide you every step of the way. With Shireen's expertise, you'll learn how to create effective Pinterest strategies tailored to your business needs, from increasing website traffic to growing your email list and boosting sales. Don't miss out on the opportunity to transform your marketing strategy with Pinterest. Visit the link in today's show notes and start leveraging the power of Pinterest to grow your business. Pinning by Bad Gringa, helping women in agriculture and small business owners succeed with Pinterest. So talk to us about the For Farmers movement and how that started.
I love to talk about this. It is such an incredible experience coming from starting this in 2022 to where we are now. It's just 2 years old, but the progression that we've made over this short period of time is, I think, incredibly powerful. And I say that sitting in the middle of our fourth grant season, and I'll fill you in on that. But really, I guess I looked at that invisibility factor and I was like, wait, you know what? I can do something about this. I have a corporate marketing background. I've worked with huge charities and grassroots organizations and big companies. And so I kind of understand, some of the, tent poles that, well, at least that I thought could help build a movement, the things that needed to be in place. And so it's incredibly focused. I share farmer stories. I do that on social media. I'm mainly on Instagram at XOXO Farm Girl is my handle. So I share stories and facts and dispel myths. And the farmers who I interview either on Instagram or on my podcast, they end up there. Or I share facts that farmers can repurpose so that their customers can understand, oh yeah, this is a good thing to share with our customers. Let's help them turn on the light bulb. So I dispel myths there. And the core program is really running a grants program. And that happens now every fall. And the idea behind it is, you live in a farming community, farmers are proud. I don't want farmers to ever think that what we're trying to do is to give a handout, because it isn't. It's a combination of recognition and respect. And the recognition comes in the form of husbands and wives and neighbors and customers and social media followers, even with so many farmers now online, to say, hey, I see you, I see what you're doing, and I want to be a little bit closer to your farm, and I want to nominate you for a grant. And I want to nominate you because I see this incredible work that you're doing. You make the most delicious carrots. You're my go-to for eggs every week. And so those nominations this season hit 940 in 50 states, which is, if you ever try to do anything like this, it's actually pretty challenging to get people off the mark, especially during an election season where people are focused on other things. So 940 nominations in 50 states. Those include 750 different nominators. And then all of those farmers who are nominated are invited to apply for a grant. And the grant is farmer directed. We don't have a specific agenda. You're a farmer. We trust you. We know what, you know best what you need. If you need a new blade for a machine, if you have experienced a loss, we have, I think, 15% of the applications this year came from areas affected by Hurricane Helene and Milton. Also some fires out west. So, there sometimes it's, incredibly urgent and they're just trying to recover from something like that. We fund innovation. Just really depends on what the farmer knows they need. So you need an egg washer, an egg washing machine to expand your egg sales business. You need a cooler for your cut flowers so that you're not leaving flowers in the field. They're all different kinds of proposals. So out of all of the farmers that were nominated this year, and this is a really astronomical number, is we have 74% applied. It's much higher than before.
Right.
And I think that's because farmers are starting to recognize the For Farmers movement and to trust that this is a place to come. You don't have to give us your firstborn. I don't want to see your bank account. You don't have to prove to me what you're saying is true. We trust you to tell the truth and to say what you need. And you trust us to review it with integrity. So 45 states applied. 50 states were nominated. And out of that, 45 states applied, also a crazy, crazy number. So we're just starting to comb through those applications. I raise money throughout the year through events, through online. I have a weekly letter, just keeping connected with people. A lot of these grants are fueled by $5 donations. I have, a luncheon and a dinner. Those two events are pretty important to the movement overall, just to be able to fund them. But this year, or in this round, our first round, we funded 6 farms. So that was a real experiment. It was sort of like a test balloon. And I still am in touch with those farms, and they're still doing great, and they're still keeping me apprised of what they're doing, which is really exciting. The second round was 20. The third round was 49. So those 3 rounds were in a 12-month period. That was 75 farms were funded. And in this one round in 2024, we should be very close to 100 farms.
Wow.
Yeah, it's exhausting, but it's so inspiring. It is so inspiring. Two things about it. One is to hear from farmers,
Right.
to hear like this is so meaningful to us. I mean, I think that we should have Kleenex as a sponsor, just to, just kind of joking around, because I can guarantee happy tears. Farmers get nominated and they're like, I can't even believe that my community noticed me. I don't even know who nominated me. Most of the applications say I don't even know who it was.
Right.
So I think that it's very exciting to have a secret admirer, and it can make your day, your week, your year. And then you apply for a grant. A lot of the farmers, I think 71% are first generation farmers. So anywhere from, a year to 15 to 20 years experience. And often this is a first grant, proof of concept for them. So also more happy tears. I hope Kleenex is tuning into your podcast, because I think they'd be a perfect sponsor.
Dana, they would be a perfect sponsor for the Rural Woman podcast, as one of the lines is like, you're making me a little misty here. So like I have the
Okay,
Kleenex
let's go
here,
talk to them
right?
together. Let's talk to them together. I think
we'll
that's
send
great.
a concerned letter to Kleenex to let them know that we are in dire need.
Exactly. So, I mean, I just feel like it's so important not to overlook the people who are creating our food and our fiber, even our fuel and our flowers, all the F words. That's really important. But I think also in the first year, I was like, okay, we're doing mini grants. I don't want anyone to get too excited about the dollar amounts. And I don't do that anymore, because it's insulting to the grants and the power that they have. Our grants are, for the most part, $500 and $1,000. You ask me who can stretch a dollar, I'd say two people: teachers and farmers. And these grants are meaningful. And there are no reporting requirements. You don't have to. I mean, most people do, but you don't have to show me where it went. I know you're going to use it for for what it was designed for.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, and the power of the grants we funded in our first round, we funded a farmer in Alaska who asked for $500 for straw. And our review committee is farmers and non-farmers. And so that was a really interesting sort of first communication, like, okay, this doesn't sound like, we're going to make any headlines by funding straw. Well, that straw enabled her to deliver 50 healthy kids of her goat herd, that freshened the milk for her dairy business in Alaska. And they also fed 50 families who use goat as a very important cultural celebration. It's about 500 people that we fed, and we fueled these, cultural celebrations that these generations are passing down. So the impact has, yes, it's hay or straw that goes right to a farm that's used for a purpose, but that purpose ultimately has a ripple effect. And so as we're looking at grants, we're asking the farmers, like, how is this going to help you? Help us understand what you're doing and how it will move things forward for you, because that's what we want to help you do.
Absolutely. And the fact that a majority of the people that you are supporting with these grants, a lot of them are the first generation farmers. So they are coming maybe not from an agricultural background, or they're going out on their own to start their own operation. I truly believe that people from outside of agriculture that come in have a certain mindset of, we don't know what we don't know, so teach us. But we also know what they don't know. So we can tell farmers who've been in this industry for their entire lives, like, there's some misconceptions out there about agriculture. And we as farmers need to speak to people in a way that is respectful, in a way that they can understand. You spoke about misconceptions people have about farming. In your experience, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that you've seen about farming and the lives of farmers?
I don't think that anybody understands the finances.
Right.
the farm is a business. And the idea that, let's say I'm a poultry farmer and I'm raising meat birds. Okay, so I've got to get chicks. And let's say those chicks cost $60,000. Not unusual, right? So I have a brooder full of all these chicks, and I have to bring them to maturity and get them to the processor, get them packaged, and get them to market. So that's $60,000. I don't see any of that money up front. That's just money out. There's no guarantee. There could be a predator. There could be, an illness. There could be anything. And a lot of small farmers don't really have any sort of backup. They live very close to the margins. So, I think that, there's maybe not a misunderstanding, but a lack of understanding around the finances. I think people miss how smart farmers are. I think they miss the ingenuity, even, beyond the formal education, which a lot of farmers do have a college degree or a higher level degree. I interviewed a rancher out in Oregon, and he, as do many farmers and ranchers, has two jobs. He's a rancher, and he also worked in Silicon Valley. So if you want to have some preconceived notion, Silicon Valley has a lot of really, really smart people in it. And he agreed. And he said that people in Silicon Valley think in a particular way. And yes, they are incredibly smart. And he said, I take a rancher any day over anyone in Silicon Valley because of how smart they are, how they can make something work, how they can problem solve, how they can, find a workaround for something that's broken without breaking the bank. So I just really have so much respect for that kind of perspective to come out and say, you know what, you don't think farmers are as smart as they really are because you just don't know. And you need to spend some time with your local farmers to really understand that.
I want to expand on this a little bit. And it's a conversation that I recently had. And you might have found this as well from talking to farmers. I think there is, I don't know if it's being humble or just the way that other people perceive them. So maybe that's how they perceive themselves. But have you found that when you speak to farmers, some farmers particularly, we're sitting here praising them about how smart they are, how intelligent they are, how many different hats they wear, but they don't see it that way. They're like, well, I'm just some dumb farmer. I didn't do good in school. So I just came home and farmed. I don't see it that way because I'm looking at it as you are continuing a generational legacy, but also having to adapt and be innovative because our world is changing and you can't farm the same way your dad did or his peepaw did, generations before, right? We have to change and we have to do things differently. And unless you have some intelligence in your brain somewhere, you're not going to be sustainable and you're not going to survive if you don't change and you don't adapt. So there has to be intelligence there. And for the farmers who doubt their own intelligence, typically I'll have the conversation with them and I'll just ask them questions about things that they know. And I'm like, how do you think that's not intelligence of what you're just sharing with me?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think there's a cultural humility built into the agricultural world, right? They're, for the most part, not chest beaters. And I think that, since we're talking about rural women too, sometimes, and I mentioned this, I interviewed an agricultural historian, and I was so fascinated, but, we were talking about the whole concept of the farm wife, right? I'm a farmer's wife. That's who I am. And I'm like, well, you're kind of the farmer, right? You're kind of driving the combine. is that not farming? I'm sorry. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. You're the farm wife. So you're just midwifing all of the sheep, right? So, and I know of a farmer in New Hampshire, and she teaches Spanish at a local prep school near their farm, and she farms. And, she considers her husband the farmer. And all of a sudden, she was actually midwifing lambs. And she's like, yeah, I think I'm just going to call myself a farmer now. I'm like, okay, thank you. Thank you. So I think there's, maybe a self-deprecation. There's not chest beating that there is maybe in other industries. And so that maybe doesn't serve farmers that well on the stage, the bigger stage, where, for example, I mean, I don't know if it's culturally or politically, but if we're allowing farmland to slip out of farmers' hands because you don't have a retirement plan, and you don't have maybe, I don't know, maybe you don't have life insurance. What are you going to, this is your nest egg. How are you going to, now you're 70, you can't like handle it anymore. You don't have a next generation to take it over. Selling it to a farmer isn't going to be as lucrative as it is to sell it either. Well, maybe to big ag or, to a real estate developer. So I get it, but it's a bigger national problem than that. Right? Like if we're losing all that farmland, it's not coming back. Once you pave it over, you're not going to go back to, corn and carrots. So I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, I think, one of the things that I say is like, don't do nothing, because nothing, that's what got us here. We got to like start as consumers, really activating on behalf of our food, which really has a ripple effect. And I think this is a point that I really try to make as often as possible, is that this is your personal and family health. It's our collective health. It's the health of our land, the vibrancy of our soil. It's our communities. Like, I mean, I don't know if you want to look at the election right now in the United States, but, urban and rural communities are not connected. This is an issue. It's an issue. We're not on the same page. We're not, we're just not connected. And we need to be creating rural environments where farming is a viable profession and where we can be connected to that and appreciate it. So, and our regional economies, local and regional economies, all of this is, what farming ripples into, and we've got to be connected to that. I feel very strongly about that. And in addition to that, I think the other thing that people don't see about small farmers, and we're really supporting through the For Farmers movement, small and mid-sized farmers across the country. Those farmers are the standard bearers for all of agriculture, especially big ag. So when big ag decides to, we're going to shave a little bit off of our expenses by doing it this way, and we're going to keep shaving, and we're going to keep shaving, and we're going to keep, making things more efficient, and our food is, less nutrient dense and less delicious and isn't doing good things for the environment. When you turn around and look at what small farmers are doing, they are the standard bearers for what we can do better in big ag. We're never going to get rid of big ag. I'm not suggesting that we do, but we need to make it better. And it's slipping. It's slipping every minute. And I think that, by supporting our small farmers and providing alternatives to the carrots in our grocery store that come in a bag from, we're not even sure where or how they were grown, and there's no traceability, right? 1,500 miles away, when we could have a carrot from our local community that is enhancing the soil, that is fueling our local economy and helping our communities be more connected and our health, all those things.
So, from what you've seen from the small and medium farms that you've connected with through your years of storytelling and being an advocate for agriculture, like you said, it's really overwhelming to be the small fish in a big pond. And, when you look at other industries or bigger people in the industry that might have the more resources and, where do people start? If I am a small or medium farmer, in your experience, from your background in marketing, where do we start to tell our stories? How do we get them heard? What's your perspective on that?
Well, I think you got to use what you got. So, what's happening in your local community? Is there any, organization that's supporting farmers? Can you pull together some farm friends from your local community so that you're not alone, right? Like, don't you feel like even in just regular everyday life, when you talk to a friend about something that's bothering you, that you think you're the only person who's ever had that thought ever? And then you're like talking to a friend and you're like, oh my gosh, everybody has this problem. So I think, like, don't be quiet. Don't sit quietly by yourself. if you feel like your local community isn't supportive enough, I found an incredible community on social media. I know that there are mean people out there. They haven't started coming for me, and I really don't have a whole lot of tolerance for them anyway. So, I try to really keep it very positive, making sure that, farmer voices are heard. Or I've had plenty of farmers reach out to me in a crisis, just to talk, but also to get their story out there. I know that there are a lot of small farmers in, let's say, communities that are somewhere between urban and rural, where more urban people who don't understand farming are moving in and saying like, oh gosh, well, I didn't realize that when I bought the house next door that your cow was going to moo that loud. So this is happening, and it's ugly stuff going on. And so I don't know, I feel like I'm collecting this group of farmers who are struggling with this kind of thing. Oh, we don't want an extra car in the neighborhood. So if people are coming to pick up flowers from your farm, that's not good for us. So I don't know. I see it in Connecticut. I see it in New Hampshire. I see it in Kansas City. I just think that we have to if we're not understanding it from two sides. So, if you're not a farmer, you really do need to understand what's going on and what the impact is and how important it is, and figure out a new level of, understanding and tolerance. And, from the other side, from the farm side, it's like, okay, well, how are we educating our consumers? How are we bringing them into the fold? How are we making them welcome? How are we helping them understand what it takes? That carrot is actually a 365-day job.
Absolutely. And I think that understanding and the respect and the tolerance, like that could be a whole new subject for any industry in this world right now. But we're talking about farming, and having those conversations and having them in a way that can be received, I think is super important. And that goes both ways, right? So
yeah,
I'm curious, what is next for the farmers movement? Where are you going, Dana? And how can we support you?
Thank you so much. I just want more people to know about For Farmers. This, we do the grants every year, right? So these grants will be announced on December 4th, which is the day after National Giving Day. So right after Thanksgiving. So hopefully during the Thanksgiving season, while we're reviewing this huge load of applications, we'll be able to raise a little bit more money, $5, $1, every single dollar counts. 100% of what comes to the For Farmers movement goes directly to farmers. I run another campaign in February called Love for Farmers. So it's very similar, with smaller grant opportunities that are really a people's choice campaign. So that's kind of fun. There's some voting involved. It doesn't involve a review panel of farmers. It's really for everybody to vote on. So that's a lot of fun. But what is next for Farmers? I think my dream right now, we are evaluating grants on a national scale. That's super important. It's really important for all 50 states to have nominations. It's something that I've had for 3 out of the 4 rounds. So really, really pushed for the messaging and the understanding to develop across all 50 states. I would like the grant making to happen through some partnerships on a regional level. And so if we do the Pacific Northwest, I would love to have a partner there in the Southwest, in the Northeast, in the South, right? In the Midwest. So to have 5 different hubs, ultimately, that would be great. I would love more people to be involved in, sort of running it in that way. That's a pretty important thing for the future, I'd say, over the next 5 years, is developing some partnerships to really expand it and to have more voices involved, more farmers. Yeah. I think that's what's next. You can find everything you want to know about the For Farmers movement at forfarmersmovement.com. I try to, I guess, we're talking about some of the complexities, right? Like, how are we engaging people who are not in the ag world? How are we engaging people who are in the ag world, who are so incredibly generous to their farm, to fellow farmers, nominating farmers they know in their own community, getting nominated themselves, and telling the entire world to nominate farmers that they know also. So it's an incredibly generous community. I want to build on that, right? I want to make sure that the folks who are not farmers are coming along as strongly as the farmers are. And to get to them, I call it 100 ways in because I really believe like we all have things we're interested in, right? I have really cute donkeys. If that appeals to you, then let's look at the donkeys and come on in and let's be friends and talk about, what's going on and, with small farmers. So whatever it is. So I have a weekly letter. You can find that on, you can subscribe on my website. I have a blog. I have the One Bite is Everything podcast. And that's not just farmers anymore. I've been doing some, historians, some experts, some chefs from all over the country, and some just expanding the, the 360 degrees around food so that we can understand maybe some of the brands you see in your supermarket people have questions about. Like, let's talk about like what's going on behind the scenes there. Because I really do believe that, one bite is everything. You take one bite of that, proverbial carrot, and it has a ripple effect into all of those very important areas of your life, from, your health to your community and your environment, all of that.
Those are all good things, and they're such positive things. And I think we need those positive things, especially in agriculture and in the world that we live in today, having that positive light and to have you leading that charge. It's been absolutely incredible to get to know you more, Dana. And my last question for you, and it's like, I was sitting here thinking, I was like, oh my gosh, what's my last question that I've been asking for the last 5+ years?
Welcome back to your podcast season.
Welcome back to the office, Caitlin. Dana, what is the most rewarding part for you for being a rural woman?
For me, honestly, it's just the opportunity to be out in nature. It gives you so many ideas and so much peace. And I think our world is pretty, chaotic, and, we're just bombarded from all sides. And some of that is good. Some of that bombardment's great. I've got an awesome family, and, I have a demanding little dog, and my donkeys hee-haw every time I walk out of the house. So, life is busy, but having the opportunity to, be up with the sun and to walk through the woods, I think it's good for me. I think it's good for everybody.
So good. Such a good answer. For the listeners who would like to connect with you, we will link all of the websites, all of the information, all of the good stuff in our show notes. But just as a reminder, where can they find you online?
Sure. So forfarmersmovement.com is a really easy place to find everything that I do, including the One Bite is Everything podcast, which is there, as well as on, what do they say? Wherever you get your podcasts. And I'm on Instagram as XOXO Farm Girl, which is just a silly old nod to Gossip Girl 1,000 years ago. But when I started my little farm, all of my friends started calling me Farm Girl. So there you go.
And as a millennial, we thank you for that nod to our cultural history. Yes.
I know. So cheesy.
So good. Thank you so much, Dana, for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
It was amazing.
Thanks for listening to the Rural Woman Podcast. The Rural Woman Podcast is more than just a podcast. We are a community. A huge thank you to the Rural Woman Podcast team, audio editor Max Hofer, and admin support from Kim & Co. Online. A special thanks to our Patreon executive producers, Sarah Riedner from Happiness by the Acre and Carrie Munven from Laystone Farms. To learn how you can become a Patreon executive producer or other ways to financially support the show, head on over to wildrosefarmer.com to learn more. Be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you listen to the podcast to get the latest episodes directly on your playlist. And if you are loving the show, please be sure to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other platform that accepts ratings and reviews. You can connect with us on social media at The Rural Woman Podcast and with me at Wild Rose Farmer. One of the best ways you can support the show is by sharing it. Send this episode to a friend or share on your social media. Let's strengthen and amplify the voices of women in agriculture together. Until next time, my friend, keep sharing your story. This week's episode of the Rural Woman Podcast is brought to you by the patrons of the Rural Woman Podcast. This amazing group of individuals contribute financially to the Rural Woman Podcast to ensure the stories of women in agriculture hit your earbuds each and every week. Want to join them in supporting the stories of women in agriculture while getting access to extended episodes, patron-only episodes, and other great perks? Head on over to wildrosefarmer.com to learn more about how you can become a patron through Patreon.